Hello and welcome to the Love, Listen, Talk, Repeat podcast. I'm Wendy Capewell, your podcast host, as well as being a counsellor and psychotherapist, author, and speaker. In each of these podcast episodes, I'll be joined by various guests, sharing their expertise and experiences on different subjects. So, let's get on with this week's show. Today I'm interviewing and yes, I'm talking to Nicky Collins, the Autism Coach. And rather than me tell you any more about them, I'm going to hand you over, Nikki, to the audience so you can tell the audience everything about you.
Okay, thank you, Wendy. So I'm Nicky Collins, the Autism Coach, and I work with autistic women and girls to help them to step into an authentic version of their autistic selves. I didn't realise until I was 34 that I'm autistic, and now it's just an absolute pleasure and honour to champion autistic females so that they can get the best out of their lives.
That sounds like a something very needing and yes, and what a lovely thing to do, to be able to share that with other people and to support them, because no one better than you who are actually having those kind of tendencies, really. So tell us more about how does. Yeah, sorry, I interrupted then.
That's okay. No, lived experience just goes a long way to knowing how the autistic experience actually is, because you're experiencing it.
Yes. So you can identify more readily. So yes, so I know that it's on a continuum, so it can be on a sliding scale, and everybody who has this condition or living with this particular thing, they're going to have different experiences. So you said you discovered it when you were 34. So tell us more about that. Tell us more about how you discovered it, and then maybe how it affects you. What brought you to say, oh, actually, there's something going on here?
I was doing a lot of networking for my business at the time, which was coaching, generic coaching. I hadn't really niched down, so to speak, back then. And I came across a neurodevelopment specialist, as you do when you're going business networking. It's not exactly common. And her son had been diagnosed with dyslexia, and the medical professionals had said to essentially write him off. He'd never amount to anything. This was a pretty common thing for medical professionals to tell people. And she didn't take this as a valid answer. She went and did her research and found another lady in Germany who'd had a very similar experience. She had done a lot of research, had done some things with reflexes, retained reflexes, which is all movement based, and it helps the body to learn. It's basically the body's earliest form of movement and learning and how we start to develop. She taught my mentor everything she knew before promptly dying. So she essentially gave her and passed on her legacy. My mentor packaged that up, and all of my knowledge came from the training that I had alongside her. And I realized that there was a family member who's autistic, and it was some time later that I was sat at my desk and I just thought, hang on, there's too many similarities here, and I don't take after them, they take after me. So I wonder. And it was really, that was when I just started to have a aha moment after another. And originally I thought that I had ADHD. And then I realized that I'm autistic as well as being ADHD, which is a whole can of worms in itself, because the ADHD brain is a bit of a scatterbrain at times, and the autistic brain likes structure. So you've got the ADHD part saying, no, sit down, don't do it today, you can leave that, go onto Facebook, scroll, scroll, scroll. And then you've got the autistic brain saying, no, it's chaos, you need to do this, you need to do it now. But I just had so many aha moments, and I still do now, 2 years on.
Yeah. Wow. Oh, that's interesting. When you say that, I think there were several things that I wanted to pick up on that when you said about the movement and how we learn through movement, because it reminded me of something that happened quite a few years ago now. But when a particular village I lived in, there was a kind of teenage boy who'd had a motorbike accident, and he was very badly affected. And what his mother did was get several teams of us from the village, so volunteers, where we actually tried to reprogram his brain by moving his limbs.
Yeah.
And it was just that reminded me about the movement. So to reprogram it at that point, I mean, it was a long time ago now, and things may have moved on, but it was just to try and get him to be able to start to move again and reprogram the brain. So that just came to my mind. It was interesting. So and then I wanted to kind of go on to the fact that you talked about that argument, your different sides, the ADHD and the autism were having that discussion between them, and that yes, I wonder what that feels like when that's going on.
Frustrating.
I can imagine.
It can feel frustrating, but just hopping back to the movements. I mean, the body's earliest movements come when you're not even born. So when you're in utero, and they start at around 9 to 12 weeks into pregnancy, and they're basically a baby's earliest defense system. They're there to keep an infant alive, and they fall off by the age of 1. So they've done their job. So if you know if you make a baby jump, it'll starfish out, its arms will go out, its legs will go out, and then it'll come back in. Maybe it'll cry, and then caregiver, mum, dad, whoever will come along, comfort the baby. That danger's over with, system calms back down, and the infant, we're talking an ideal world, it goes back to sleep. And the reflex has done its job. That then turns into the adult startle reflex. So what that means, Wendy, if I hide behind that door behind me, jump out at you, you're going to have a response. Your heart rate's going to increase. You might have a little bit of a lump in your throat, but you'll quickly ascertain it. It's just me.
I scream. I actually, I just scream out loud. Anyone makes me jump, I literally have a very, very strong startle response. And even if even simple things, I will jump out my skin. Even a notification on my computer, I will jump even though I'm expecting it. I have an extreme startle response, and acknowledge that. But yes, I get it. It is, as you say, part of our survival system.
It is. So when you'd ascertain that there's no danger. So you might scream, and then you're like, oh, okay, it was just that. And you quickly calm back down. And someone that's still got that junior reflex, which is actually called the Morrow Reflex, this little cute baby starfish, they retain that, and they have the over dramatic. So they will melt down on the floor, or they'll physically hit you, and it'll take a long time for the system to calm back down. So it's things like this, because the body and brain has no way to revisit any of these misstages of development, because we learn and develop so quickly, we have to do it manually, and that's what I was taught to do. And it's things like the babies who go straight to walking, so the bum shufflers who just get up and they miss the crawling stage, and that crawling stage with the arms moving synchronizes both hemispheres, both sides of the brain. So it's things like this, and it just seems so small and insignificant, but it can have a profound knock-on effect.
And hence why that mother with that teenage boy was trying to do the reprogramming by getting volunteers to, move each of the limbs as though in the crawl kind of motions. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I find it absolutely fascinating. Neuroscience is Awesome. And yeah, about the other thing is, I understand that we're only born with two fears. That's the fear of loud noises and the fear of falling. Everything else is a developed or learned phobia.
Yeah.
So that's another interesting thing, isn't it? So
It
yeah.
really is.
So what happens? What happens then to the autistic brain? Or what happens there?
In what respect?
Well, how does it, why does it become in that way? Why does that kind of development happen differently to someone who doesn't have autism?
I'm not sure. So every neurotypical, so non-autistic, non-divergent person will develop on the exact same timeline. And you might have something like a cesarean section. There's one specific reflex which turns a baby into a corkscrew, and that helps to aid a natural delivery. So if you have a cesarean birth, there's no way for that reflex to integrate. It will always stay. And I think that one is spatial awareness, car sickness, and things like that. So it's I still have to look and refer to sort of like my list. I don't always retain all the information. There's so much there.
No, that's okay.
But also autism is almost always genetic. So it's passed down the family lines. So it's kind of like, who do you know in your family who's the eccentric, the quirky one, the oddball? I said it in inverted commas. So there's always someone, and it always comes down the family line, which is often why parents, especially mums, get a diagnosis for their children and then think, oh, hang on, and then realise that they're autistic.
Wow. And yet we're all on that continuum to some degree or another for autism. And
I disagree with that, because no, I think that we all have characteristics and traits that could be classed as autistic traits, but to say that we're all on the spectrum, that's like saying my feet ache, my lower back sore, everyone's a little bit pregnant. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I get that. I get that.
But when you get a certain amount,
traits, then maybe.
Yeah, maybe. So when you get to a certain amount of challenges, which we call traits, that's when you start to get into being autistic. That's when it starts to impair your life, because it's outside of your control. I also like to see autism as a circle rather than a linear scale of high or low functioning. Because if you've got high functioning and low functioning, you have to have spicy and flaming hot autism. It's just the way it is. Just different flavors.
I like it. Referring to flavors, that's an interesting one, isn't it?
Yeah.
So how does that affect your day-to-day life?
Well, it could be, so on paper, I would be classed as a high-functioning autistic adult. But there are some days where I wouldn't be able to get out of bed because I've just reached my sensory capacity, and actually adding anything onto my load is just way too much. So on those days, do I still look like a high-functioning adult? I don't. This is the danger and the damage that labels can do, because someone who's lower down, are they lowered down because they can't physically communicate with words so that someone else doesn't understand them? If you give them a computer, an electronic device, they may be able to communicate just as effectively, if not more so, than someone who uses words as their first language, or using sign language, or some other form, visual forms. Words is just a language that the majority of us understand, because this is what we're taught. So using functioning labels, I really don't like them, because it just detracts from the struggles that we all face, regardless of where we are. So I say, I look at it as a circle.
Regarding labels.
I look at it
right.
as a
Yeah.
circle. So if you're having a good day, a high functioning day, you're at the top of the circle and you get input, sensory inputs, or something happens that's outside of your control and you start to slide down, you might be able to catch it and pull yourself back up or have some help back up. You might be feeling really terrible because the day before you had a really busy day. So the next day you're feeling the effects of like a social hangover almost, and you're at the bottom of the circle. So what can you do today to get yourself back up? Maybe it's just that you need to rest. Maybe you need to chill out. Maybe you need to do absolutely nothing. Maybe there's something in your toolbox that can help you. So it's about finding what works for you as an individual. And then you're always moving around. It's very fluid. So to look at it as something linear is very inaccurate. It's very outdated.
Yeah, and I think what I'm hearing is getting to know yourself, learning what works and what doesn't, how you're feeling, getting in touch with your body and your whole being to what do I need right now, what's going on for me, and what do I need. And then I guess it is trial and error with the contents of your toolbox.
Absolutely. And the earlier you are when you start developing that toolbox, regardless of whether you have a diagnosis or not, the better, because you're just setting yourself up for more success when you're older. It's not always about being happy, because as you very well know, Wendy, you can't be happy and positive all the time. But if you're having a downward spiral and your toolbox is there and available, you can limit how far down you go before you start to come back up, and the length of time you're in that dip. That's what I've learned over the years anyway.
Yeah. And I reckon that, that's the same with a lot of things that any of us go through. If you're feeling a particular way, then you do need that toolbox. You need to know what it is that you need right that minute, whether it is a duvet day, whether it is to go out and have a walk, whether it is to have something high energy or relaxation, whatever those tools are, we all need to know ourselves so much better than most of us do, so that we are in touch with ourselves, what's going on for us, what do I need right this minute. It's like when people say, well, everyone should meditate. I don't see meditation as sitting there going, because that doesn't always work for me. I might find that what gets me is good for me is maybe it might be some gentle music that I enjoy, or it might be some real rock music, and that will just change my state of mind. And that's what I need. And I think it is just knowing ourselves so much more better. And so many people don't.
It's surprising how many people don't, and it's surprising how many people never invest in personal development. It shocks me, actually. I've always sort of worked on myself, and I think the day that you stop learning is a very sad day, because it stunts your growth. It really does. I'm always learning, always looking for ways to sort of transcend an older version of myself and step into a newer, upgraded one.
That's really interesting. I like that thought. Yeah, I kind of feel the same way, although I will freely admit I wasn't into self-development at an early age, that was for sure. I missed quite a few years when I was just screwing things up and didn't know why. And kept going the same kind of pattern. Just, here I go again. Oh, well, whatever. I'm not even thinking about it. But then there came a point where this has got to stop. I need to do something differently, because I'm not liking the person I am, and I'm not enjoying my life as I feel I could. So bumbling along, just from one disaster to another, I think.
Yeah. I've got into personal development in my early 20s, so I was quite fortunate, really. It gave me a good basis to move forward. So when my world did fall apart, which it did, when my world did fall apart, I was eventually able to use the tools to get myself back up into to the state where I am now. And without that basis, which I had before everything went wrong, I don't think I'd be where I am today. So it really did set me up quite well.
That's good, because it was probably a decade later that you acknowledged or realized that you did have autism.
Yeah. So I don't know how that would have changed things if I'd have known back then. But then I look back and I wouldn't actually change anything, because every experience, it just adds into the person I am today, and I'm incredibly strong and resilient. And that's only really comes from lived experience. You don't get that from having an easy life.
No, you're right. And I think resilience is something that we all, I know, I'll say, well, shit happens. That's it. We can't control what's going on outside of our lives. And the only thing we have control is over ourselves. And building resilience is the best way, because it's going to happen, whether it's a pandemic, whether it's something that is out of our control, whether we lose somebody, whether it's a breakup of a relationship, whatever those things that might happen to us, we can't always control them. And therefore, building that inner strength that's what I always suggest to everybody. Build that resilience. That will give you, as part of our toolbox, isn't it? But yes, having that is so much more important.
Absolutely. I was saying to a friend today who's going through a bit of a rough patch at the moment, depression is when you're in the past, anxiety is when you're in the future. And then sometimes when you're going through stuff and you're caught in the past, you've got one foot there and you're trying to like work out where you're going with your life and thinking, I must do something because I can't just stop and stagnate. So you're almost in the future. You've got that anxiety added in. So you've got one foot in the past worrying, a foot in the future worrying, and you're kind of caught in this limbo state of the present moment. So in the healing process, it's about chipping away at the traumas and healing from them, and just inching ever closer to almost bridge that gap between the present and the future, so that you can actually start to move forward positively rather than feeling stuck. And she liked that analogy.
I like that analogy too. Yes. And we can so easily get stuck, as you say. The past is gone. It's history. We can't change it at all. We don't know what's happening in the future because it hasn't happened. So those two things, worrying about them, isn't helping at all, is it? We need to, I say the past, yesterday was history. Tomorrow is a mystery. Today is the present. It's a gift. So enjoy it. Live it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's fascinating. So, I mean, I guess, where do people find their tools for their toolbox?
Well, for me, it's been through the conversations that I've had. It's through I now very much try and just go with the flow. So if the universe has an idea for me, I try and go with it rather than fight against it, like I did in my younger years, thinking that I know better. So the path it's never what you kind of envision it to be, but you always end up getting towards the goals if you set them. And it's amazing what the universe provides you with. So the people, the tools, just through a random Facebook post, and you think, ooh, that's what I need right now. And you go onto it and you have a read, and then you go down this rabbit hole. So just follow the breadcrumbs and just, I think, really trust the process as it unfolds, because it is amazing what happens when you relinquish your control. I don't mean that you just like give up and roll over. I don't mean that, but just trust in the process as it unfolds, because there is a grander plan for you, and we'll always be supported. It just might not feel like it at the time, but if you look back at your greatest challenges, they're some of the biggest lessons that have been actually gifted to you from the ways in which you've overcome them or gone around them, and just had to take a very different route to what you thought you'd need to in the very first place. So always have faith in yourself. It always comes around.
As long as you don't roll over and die.
Well, yeah, don't do that.
Well, I think that's the worst thing, because I think people can give up so easily and say, that's my life, that's it, no point. And yet the number of people that I speak to who have got I'm going to say, I want to say disabilities, but I don't mean it in that quite that way, but it is something that's disabling or could be disabling, and it can be physical, it can be emotional, it can be a condition. I think it can be something that you could see as limiting, and yet those people that I've met are just amazing. They've achieved so much, and I think I have such admiration for people who say, no, I'm not going to lay down and die. I'm going to get on with this. And it doesn't have to be a celebrity. They're just ordinary people that I meet. And I think this is it. We don't have to just lay down and say, oh, that's it, there's no point. Because we're not living the life that we were probably meant for, or that we, not fully our full potential. And I think that's it, isn't it?
I think that the most successful people, I mean, success is defined by the individual. So what one person's success is could be someone else's failure. But some of the most successful kind of people I have met don't follow social norms. They go almost against the grain, and they're the happiest for it because they're not confined to this set of expectations that have been placed upon them because it fits a nice tick box criteria. That's what, I didn't expect you to do that. Yes, and aren't I happier for it? Yes, I am. So it's amazing that what I see in the work that I do and the people that I kind of interact with, and how much happier people are for being different and embracing those differences rather than trying to cover them up, which is probably one of the best things about being autistic, actually, because I know I'm different, and now I don't actually care as much, because if you don't like it, that's absolutely fine. We're just not the right people, not right match for each other. There's plenty more people out there for you to go and find the people that match your resonance, and me to find mine.
I think that's incredible. Yeah, I love that. And it is just not following that social norm or what's expected. I think that's really important. So yeah, I just want to ask you, what could you suggest that people do if they're, what can they take away? I think that was a really good one that you said, but I'm sure you've got loads of them. And what can you say to people that will help them, I don't know, move forward, a tip or something? Someone who has been diagnosed with autism, for example, or they've got a family member, or they're trying to support somebody. What do you say to them?
Well, I'd say firstly that you are enough, and you have always been enough. So just remember that. And the industry, the medical industry, they make autism out to be something that is really, really negative. And it isn't. It is just different. We've got a different brain type. And just because you're different doesn't mean that you're any less than somebody else. It just means you think differently. It means that your processing, your processes, they're different to neurotypical, non-autistic and non-divergent individuals. And that's okay. So find what your strengths are and work to them. Find what your weaknesses are and cater to them. If you can work around them, work around them. If you can't always work around them, just try and minimize sort of your exposure to them and just incorporate them, accept them. Don't fight against it. We all have weaknesses. We all have strengths, regardless of whether we're autistic, non-autistic, ADHD, OCD, whatever. So just play to those strengths, because you have lots of them in an abundance. And sometimes we just get so worn down and told that we're not good enough when you're more than good enough. So that comes back to you are enough, and you have always been enough.
Great. I think that is such great advice, and I think every one of us could follow that, because we are all different. It's just some people are labelled, or they aren't accepted as just being different. And yeah, we are. We're unique. We're not clones, and we're not robots. So yeah, I would say that's it.
Yeah. See, the thing with labels is
fascinating.
I was just going to say there's a bit of time lapse there. I was just going to end with saying that the thing with labels is if you see them as a label, that can be a negative connotation. If you see them as a gateway to a better understanding of yourself, that's a much more positive and healthy way to look at it. And that's...
No, I think that's great. I've really found our conversation today fascinating. And how can people, an easy way that people can get in touch with you?
I'm quite easy to find because I'm on the internet under the autismcoach.co.uk. I'm on YouTube, the Autism Coach, Facebook, the Autism Coach, and TikTok as, you've guessed it, the Autism Coach. So I'm everywhere. So you can drop me a message on my website or any of those social media platforms and follow me over there as well for sort of tips and advice and videos and things.
Thank you so much, Nikki. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Wendy.
I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I'd love to hear from you and what you think, so do get in touch. If you'd like to learn more about me, how I help people who are struggling with issues relating to their personal life or relationships, as well as finding out how you can work with me, go to my website, www.wendycapewell.co.uk, where you can find my contact details and book a free call with me. You really don't have to struggle alone. Until next time, take care. Bye.